Hello, my name is Alex, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about the 5 things I wish I had known before signing up to do my Pilates teacher training program. Okay, so to begin, the first thing I'm going to say is this video is not to belittle any specific teacher training programs or the content or to talk about contemporary versus classical versus modern, whatever Pilates. This is not that video. It's more having to do with the personal decision, the financial decision of whether a teacher training program makes sense for you, and kind of clearing up maybe the expectations that you might have before making that kind of a decision and the implications it has for you and your job. So the first thing that I'm going to say is that teacher training costs a lot more than is what is written in the program cost descriptions. So for me, I've definitely spent I'd say more than, I don't know, $2,000 at least on personal trainings, on attending classes, on workshops, on all these other things during my just teacher training program time, in addition to the teacher training tuition fee, which is something that I didn't know going into that experience, or I didn't realize that that was going to be a necessity. It wasn't going to be an option. I did ask questions before I signed up for the 2 programs that I've been through. So I've been through 2 different teacher training programs. And I thought that I'd kind of cleared up all expectations and knew what I was getting into, but in the end there were still surprise costs that weren't just a little bit, they were much, much higher, and I saw them as necessary to actually be able to complete and graduate the program. The biggest thing that I would say with that is taking personal trainings. So my first program that I went through didn't include that there was actually a requirement for you to have a certain number of personal training sessions during your training time. So not something you'd done beforehand. You couldn't backtrack if you had been a Pilates client for a few years or anything like that. You had to do it once you'd actually started the program and were going through the curriculum. The second program that I did, it's not a requirement for the program, but I realized that because of how so many Pilates sessions are taught, and that there are a lot of variations that are given, and the names of the exercises, but every day feels a little bit different, that I didn't feel as confident knowing, okay, this is X exercise and this is exactly how the book wants you to do it. And that's something that I felt I needed to work with someone one-on-one with, and not just study on my own time, because then my own movement patterns and kind of, I don't even want to say misunderstandings, but expectations of how you could do a certain exercise might influence that, which might be thought of as quote unquote incorrect for the actual final exam. So that's number 1. Things are more expensive than they seem. Number 2, you might need to adjust your learning style / not all Pilates programs work for different types of learning styles. So for me, I have a very critical thinking background. I studied art history in university. I have my master's degree in experiential learning. I used to work as a project manager in education before working in movement and fitness full time. So I'm very used to kind of deconstructing problems and talking about it and kind of taking a step back. And never in any of my schooling, including when I was in high school, was I really trained just to repeat things and to kind of take something and then just show that I could demonstrate it. I also didn't dance, so that's not a skill set that I have. And I think that has been probably my biggest challenge, in addition to the financial stuff, going through teacher training programs. For me, I'm a little bit more fluid in my thought process. It's important to me that individuals can reflect or demonstrate an understanding of a concept less so that they can just do an exact movement pattern or just, describe an idea. And that for me has definitely been a challenge, because I've had instances in, say, my practical exams where I made certain teaching decisions that might have been considered like off book, but I considered appropriate for the body that I was working with. And the feedback I got wasn't necessarily positive. It wasn't you're going to flunk this, but it wasn't seen as the right decision for the time and place and the level of my education that I was in. So do expect, I think, even if they say that they're a fluid open program, if it's your first teacher training, there is going to be a lot of memorization, a lot of parroting, and really getting things down to like the exact same wording, which is something I really, really did not expect. I'm sure that there are going to be people who disagree with that, but that's my experience based off of the two programs that I've been through. Number 3, in terms of finding a job, this is an interesting one because there's a lot of controversy about it, I think, within the Pilates community. But what I found, unfortunately, is people and studios don't really care what kind of certification you have, especially when you're getting started. And I'm not saying this is a way to deter people. I think this is a much, much larger issue that I would like to talk about at another time. But I've seen instances where people with just a mat certification have been hired to teach reformer and apparatus courses, while people who are going through a comprehensive and studio training are not hired. I've seen people go through, the big names, the big schools, and get hired automatically. I've seen, and then they're working with people who've maybe done like some small unknown or independent studio certification. So it's really, really a mixed bag. For me personally, looking back, I wish I had just gone for my mat certification. It would have saved me a lot of money. I did have experience teaching on equipment from another fitness method that I'm also certified in to teach. And that I wish I'd kind of taken that time and saved the money to build up a clientele, maybe build relationships with studios and kind of see where that had led me, as opposed to going through and just going straight for the full comprehensive, because that takes more time. So it also meant I wasn't certified sooner rather than later. And I didn't see any immediate benefit to going for that full certification, the full studio and comprehensive certification, in terms of my actual income and hours that I was able to teach. And I think that that's really, really important, that you go into this knowing like what are your financial expectations for once you're certified, because that's something that is not discussed. Number 4, I guess this is kind of a two-way thing. To kind of piggyback on the last point about finances, there's going to be people out there who are trying to make money off of the fact that you want to work. And this is a really difficult subject and something that took me a really long time to understand. And I didn't want to accept it. And I don't necessarily think these people are doing anything out of malice or bad will, but I think it's good to know. So basically, when I started working in Pilates, I was coming from at that point I'd been teaching group fitness for 2 years full time. I had a stable income, and I thought that Pilates was going to be more of an appropriate fit for my teaching style and kind of where I wanted to go with my career. And I realized in my first teacher training program that I wasn't seeing a clear pathway to like a sustainable income and sustainable hours, and that was something I wanted to address. So I started looking into different resources, and I realized that there's a lot of instructors out there who sell business coaching, business programming, all kinds of stuff, mentorships, and all those sorts of things. And so I thought that it made sense to go through something like that to try to understand my industry better. Simultaneously, when I would go and talk to studios, about working for them, I started to notice that studios were actually, their business was renting their space to instructors. It wasn't actually providing a Pilates business, because ultimately what they did and their function, the whole scheme of things, was a studio would, they would have a building space, they would rent it to the instructors, and the instructors would then take home, whatever they made. That setup, though, then meant that maybe if a studio was saying, oh, well, you pay us rent and we'll manage your marketing, if you ever disagreed with the marketing strategy, ultimately it didn't matter for that studio business, because their money is just making sure they pay their bills to keep their lights on. Not necessarily that, you as a freelance or a contracted Pilates teacher have as many hours. Additionally, that's a whole other topic in terms of contracts, so maybe I'll talk about that another time. But with all of that said, I think it's important for individuals to, before going down the road of teacher training, to kind of have a real honest talk with yourself, get an Excel, make a budget, look at how much money you need to make this work and to make it worth your while, before making a commitment for, $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000, whatever it is, to do a teacher training program. Because once you're in that situation where you've already invested a lot of money, and you're trying to make it work, it's easier to decide to invest in different types of programming, with the hope that it'll help you make ends meet, even though there's no guarantee that it will. Simultaneously, the same can be said for continuing education programs and workshops. I know that I took a lot of different workshops because I felt that would increase my skill set, and I felt that would also increase my hireability, make my range bigger for the type of people that I could be working with. But ultimately, I realized that all of these service providers I was working with weren't necessarily interested. Their business was making money off of me, and that was it. That was where their business service stopped. It wasn't that I was actually getting more money in the end. So I think it's again a very delicate topic, but something I think to be very, very aware of. That there's going to be people out there who are going to be trying to make money off of you and your attempts to turn Pilates into a full-time career. Again, I'm not trying to shame those people, but I think it's good for people to know that that's a real thing. The last thing that I wish I had known before starting my teacher training programs, is that the expectation, generally set by the industry, is that instructors start their own studio, large or small, and that they're independent Pilates teachers, not that they're employees. This is super, super important. I know it's different for everyone based off of geographical location, how it works in your region in terms of self-employment laws, taxation, healthcare benefits, all of that kind of stuff. So for me, I did have a business background before working in fitness and movement. I do feel very comfortable, crunching numbers in Excel and taking a step back, and looking at things from a strategic perspective. With that said, though, I didn't enter the Pilates world with the goal of starting my own business. That was not what I wanted to do with this. I really just wanted to work in movement. I actually also really wanted to be an employee for someone and have someone else kind of manage all of that stuff, the day-to-day. The reasons for that are super, super personal. It has to do with where I live and all kinds of different things that I'm not going to get into. But the more I kind of poked around, the more I heard from various people that the norm is just that I should go rent a room somewhere and take my reformer and my chair, and just set up shop and do private clients. That wasn't what I was initially envisioning for myself. That also wasn't the expectation I had when I signed up for the programs of the type of career I would have. I really thought that I was going to be working in a studio environment with a team, that I'd have that kind of community, that I'd teach group classes, which is something I personally really enjoy doing. And I wasn't by no means expecting to make a ton of money and become a millionaire off of Pilates, but I did expect that it would be reasonable to be financially independent, and be able to, pay for a decent apartment and food and all of those kinds of things. It can be very, very unclear in a lot of marketing materials how much money you can expect to make. So unless you go into a teacher training program with some sort of guarantee of what's going to happen on the other end, like a studio has already agreed to hire you, that is definitely not normal practice, but maybe it is something that you've come across. That can change things up, but I think it's a hard road to go down when you think, okay, I'm going to do this certification to get hired, and then you realize later that everyone is telling you, oh no, the only way to do this as a career is if you start your own studio. That's obviously not for everyone for many, many reasons. But I wish that I had known that, because I think emotionally and mentally it would have prepared me differently, and I also would have made, again, different choices about what I invested my money in terms of teacher training. So again, last one is that the general industry expectation is that you start your own studio. And with that said, oftentimes there's people who then again are trying to generate income over Instagram, over promoting, materials and goods that they sell, by selling webinars, courses, all kinds of stuff. So that's a whole other topic again. But bottom line expectation is, if you want a sustainable career in Pilates, most likely you're going to have to start your own studio. So those are the 5 things that I wish that I had known before starting my teacher training programs. Again, I've been through 2 separate teacher training programs. This is not to criticize them. I have friends who I talk to all around the world who've been through their own programs, again, also through large organizations, small studios, whatever it is. And we're all more or less kind of having very similar experiences. So I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions, shoot me an email, and have a great one. Thanks so much.